Welcome to a collaborative podcast brought to you by newclevelandradio.net and Cleveland 13 News. I'm your host, Karen Hale, and I'm honored to share space with my extraordinary guests. Some are from Cleveland, but many are from beyond. They have discovered their purpose and their power to live it out fully while lifting others along the way. Before I introduce you to my guest, I want you to know something that really resonates with me, and it's a quote by Maya Angelou. She speaks directly about my guest. If you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. Well, Henriette sure has made changes, and you've changed your attitude. My guest is a two-time kidney transplant warrior from the age of 13 through 56. She is 11 years sober from drugs and alcohol, and in no particular order, she says she loves her husband, Kevin. So do I. Writing, sponsoring women, acting in Hallmark movies, which every time you post one, Henriette, I make sure I watch it. She loves black licorice and her dog. Her dog's name is Jack. She will interrupt you mid-sentence if she sees the dog, so don't be insulted. That's just who she is. She's the author of In Pillness and in Health, Big G and Me, and Are You There, Judy Blume? It's me, Henriette. You know, I met you through mutual friends on Facebook. And the first time I asked if you would do a podcast with me, you asked very openly, well, have you read my book? And the answer was no. And you said, well, after you read it, we can talk about it. And I was so glad you told me to read it. But I have to tell you, when I read about your struggles with kidney failure, surgery, and getting addicted to drugs, yours is the first book I ever felt that I was in your body. I felt myself crawling on the floor. I felt myself feeling everything you wrote about. I read Big G and Me in Pillness the same way. And in your most recent, Are You There, Judy Blume? It's me, Henriette. Oh my God, I was asking some of the same questions. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you write so magnificently.
Oh gosh. Well, first of all, Karen, thank you for having me. You're really inspiring. You just have such passion for what you do, and that resonates, and I identify with that, and I think that's why we're kindred in that way. And I appreciate you very much. I really appreciate people like you trying to talk openly and freely about all the things that connect us. Um, yeah, I mean, gosh, how do I start? How do I write? So much of who I am today is directly informed by me being sober. There's no question. There's no way around that. And the first book that I wrote in Pillness and in Health was essentially about the year that I was addicted to pharmaceuticals, and my husband Kevin was a donor for me and gave me my second kidney transplant. My first kidney transplant was from my mother, and I was so addicted that I had no concept of it was very tied up in my mind as justified and rationalized because I was sick taking these pain meds, I mean. And I didn't understand that I had a disease. And that's the way that I look at it. I don't look at and I use the words addiction and alcoholism interchangeably.
Oh,
Because, alcoholism is defined. It is defined, it is a disease, and it's defined in the American Medical Association. It's defined under both the physical and the psychiatric classifications. And so the three requirements to establish a disease in the AMA is that it has symptoms, they progress, and it responds to treatment. And so that is the case with alcoholism. It is something that there are definitely symptoms, and the key with alcoholism is it's not just about drinking. In fact, it's really very little to do with drinking. Drinking really is just a symptom. The disease of alcoholism is centered in my brain, and it's the way that I think, it's the way that I perceive life, it's my reaction to life. If you come to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, you might hear that I have a living problem. I don't know how to interact with people. I'm very much rooted in myself, in selfishness and self-centeredness. And truly, what alcoholics need is some kind of a spiritual experience, which sounds very woo-woo, and that's fine. But that's truly what it is. I have an allergy to drugs or alcohol. If I take one pill now, I can't stop. It triggers a craving in me I can no longer overcome. So I simply can't stop. I'm then obsessed. If I take one pill, I'm literally obsessed with getting more. At some
Okay.
point, I crossed the line. I lost the power of choice. And then there's this emptiness inside me, which I have known my entire life. There's just this feeling all the time. You'll hear from alcoholics that I'm less than, I'm not good enough. The classic definition of an alcoholic is often someone with a megalomaniac ego with low self-esteem. Like I was either the greatest thing in the world, or if you didn't think so, I was the biggest piece of poop that the world revolved around. Like there was no balance, there was no humility, right? And so that's where the spiritual solution comes in, which is essentially cleaning myself out, recognizing my behaviors, making amends, and then being of service. But when I had the first transplant and Kevin gave me his kidney, I had no awareness that it was a disease. I had none of it. I really just thought the world was punishing me, things were being done to me. I just don't have an ability to flip my perception. And of course, today, apropos of your topic and your podcast, my purpose, my power, what is my authenticity? Today, I understand I can do something with that. I can do something with my years of chronic illness, with my years of alcoholism. When I was locked in my selfishness and self-centeredness, my self-pity, my justified anger, truly, I mean, I could be justified. I was on dialysis. I was only 40. I was losing my first transplant. I really just thought this is just being done to me. There's no such thing as God. This is just I'm being punished. And today it's the complete opposite. It's your quote. Change your attitude. And now I can see how profoundly I can be of service, not just within the alcohol community by sponsoring women, but hopefully, like you said, hopefully writing in such a way that can draw people into my experience so that they might better understand how an alcoholic's mind is truly held hostage. Like that was really what I wanted to achieve with Pillness was the thinking and where alcoholism truly is rooted. It's in the way that I think. I didn't care about my husband. I was going to steal his medication. I was going to figure out a way to rationalize it so that I felt okay with it. That's what I hope to achieve with my writing is not just with alcoholism, but also with learning to live with chronic illness and all its inherent challenges. And so I'm happy to hear you felt like you were in your body experiencing that.
Well, and it's interesting because I've never been a drinker. I'm very careful with medication, except for one. I've been a migraine sufferer since I was 18. And the only thing that any of my doctors have been able to come up with is Emitrex. And
Yeah.
I'm so afraid of taking it because it can hurt your heart. And so I hoard my Emitrex, and then I'll find that I have suffered for a week with the migraine and I just am blinded. And now I'm taking one pill after another. And
Mm.
it was interesting when I read In Pillness, I saw myself crawling through, you know, I need it, but I can't take it yet because I'm going to need it really soon. And then
Yeah.
taking it and thinking, okay, I'm fine.
Yes.
And I finally went back to my neurologist and explained it to her. And she said, what have we told you? In your case, when that migraine starts to come on, you take it then because you won't have to take a half a dozen or more. And
That's
she's
right.
right. But I'm this stubborn person. Oh, I can make it through this.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
again, after I read that, that's when I went and talked to her about it. And she said, listen to me. Number one, you are not addicted to this medication, but you could be if you don't start taking care of yourself properly.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
what you eventually decided to do as well. That,
Mm.
if I really, I don't know if you ever thought, hey, if I really want to be happy, this is what I have to do. But I know
Mm.
when you got your second kidney, you basically were probably told, hey, this is it. And if you don't take care of it, this
I
is
don't think, it's interesting. The medical establishment really didn't have any clue as to the depth of my drinking and using. And I did
wow.
reject Kevin's kidney, which I did talk about in Pillness. And it is, even when I overdosed for the first time on Fiorinol and we went to the ER, the psychiatrist there, the ER psychiatrist, she wanted to 5150 me because she thought that I had been trying to kill myself because I took 120 Fiorinol in 2.5 days.
Oh,
Because at that point, the addict's body, like I have lost the power of choice. I can't rationalize anymore. Like once it's in my system, my body is just going to crave more. So I've proven that to myself, which isn't actually enough information. It's less about information, it's more about action. But when she and then Kevin, God bless him, talked her out of a 5150, which for your listeners who don't know, it means that they perceive you to be a danger to yourself and others and want somebody to watch you for 72 hours
right.
in your hospital room. So he talked them out of that. But this is the key. The key is that she thought I had been trying to kill myself. And I knew I hadn't, Karen. I knew I hadn't been trying to kill myself. I knew that I had been taking my pills. I knew I'd been abusing them a little bit to get high, but I did not understand why I had taken 120 in 2.5 days. I really didn't understand that. And that's because I didn't understand that I'd lost the power of choice. I didn't understand that that's what alcoholism is, that it was a craving in my body could no longer overcome. So that's the difference between a normal person like yourself. You have the ability to rationalize, to
Yep.
listen to a doctor, to make sense of what they're saying. Whereas the alcoholic will find a way to twist the information and keep taking it no matter what. And that's the difference. That's what kills us. Yeah.
So, what was the key then for you to start making the changes? Because
Hmm.
you made the changes, and I'm sure they weren't easy. Um, but if your brain doesn't comprehend you need to change, how do you change?
Well, eventually, I did overdose again, and I went into rehab. I went into a rehab in West Hollywood, and I started to meet other people, obviously, who were clients in the rehab, and I started to recognize that we thought differently than normal people. So I heard, and this may sound shocking, but I heard they would have people come from outside the community and come and talk to us on Sunday nights, and they'd have these in-person meetings. And I remember this man talking about how he beat up his mother in order to get money from her so that he could buy more meth or something like that. And I remember part of me not even flinching, but thinking, oh, that's rough, but recognizing that I had done the same. I had hit my husband wanting him to return my drugs. And I recognized that level of desperation in him. And I remember thinking, oh, I'm in the right place. These people think the way that I do. And then I met a gentleman in there who's still my friend today, Steve. And we were the only ones in our 40s. Everybody else was in their 20s. And so we became fast friends very quickly. And I said to him, I said, Steve, I just remembered. This was like on the third day. I said, I just remembered I drank rubbing alcohol. Like I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I forgot about that. And he said to me, oh, I drank cough syrup once. And he looked at me, he said, why would we do that? And we started laughing hysterically. And we didn't quite understand that that was because we'd lost the power of choice and our bodies were telling us that we needed to have more of some substance. But I knew that I was in the right place in terms of people thinking the way that I did. And so I started to hear it more and more and more because it's lost on us. It's lost on alcoholics when you hear you're drinking too much. Why can't you just stop? Look at what you're doing. It doesn't land. Like none of that will land. And so it wasn't until I started going to meetings on a regular basis and hearing other women in particular share the way that I shared. And it was less about how much we drank and less about how much we used drugs and more about how we felt about things and our perception of life that was completely unmanageable, that was really nonsensical. And it's a very hard thing to explain to a normal person, but I simply don't think the same way you do. I wake up every morning, it's my little shtick when I share in meetings, but it's like my brain is a talk radio station and it's all Henrietta all the time. And I have to use certain tools, the crux of which is the 12 steps, which brings about an internal change within me. And that changes my frequency every morning, right? So it's a long process in the beginning. It's not like you go to a meeting and you just sometimes people do lose the desire to drink, sometimes people don't. But you usually find a sponsor, you start listening to them, you start doing what they suggest, and you get into the 12 steps, which we obviously won't get into here. But that is what, and that's how it connects back to your quote. If I can't change what's happening in my life, Alcoholics Anonymous helped me change my reaction to it and my attitude to it, which is really what the second book, Big G, is about. That finding that spiritual connection that would help me deal with years of chronic pain when nothing else would help.
So you and Kevin, when you went into rehab, were married how long at that point?
How long was I in rehab? For two
No, how
months.
long had you been married when you went in?
Oh, yes. Yes. Forgive me. I think it was about 17 years or something. Yeah, we're 30 now. So yeah.
So 17 years, he saw you going through these struggles. Wonderful person because he stayed with you. Okay. And
Hmm.
typically we don't see that. Typically, when people are struggling as much as you are, or were, I should say, um, the spouse just feels like, if I can't do anything, and what is going on in this relationship? And yet it appears from reading your books that rehab, continue going to your meetings regularly, learning how to understand what you have to do for you to get through
Hmm.
a day
Yeah.
has really blossomed your marriage. And
Hmm.
because any of you who might follow Henrietta on Facebook or might see things from her husband, you two are truly the love couple.
That's so
And
kind.
it makes me smile that there are good people in this world that stay together.
That's very true. I mean, I am very well aware uh, of how lucky I am. I also will never understand what he went through in the same way he'll never understand what it's like to be held hostage by a condition that makes you do things you don't really want to even do. Um, and we needed a lot of help. I needed to become a very connected part of Alcoholics Anonymous. He went to our sister program, Al-Anon, which really helped him understand that it was a disease. That was very hard for him in the beginning. The idea that alcoholism is a disease in the same way kidney disease is. I was going through it at the same time. He's like, well, it's not the same. And it really is. It really, truly is. And it affects everybody. Kevin's journey has been one that I can't speak to, obviously, because I'm not Kevin. I suspect he knew on some level underneath it all. I was incredibly lost. And, but I think it took I know it took a number of years before he even trusted me again. He used to go to Scotland once a year to play in the World Pipe Band Championships. And he said it took about 3 years before, when he left and was in Scotland for the 2 weeks, where he knew that I wasn't going to relapse or use drugs. Or, I mean, 3 years of me showing up differently on a regular basis. And a lot of marriages don't last, I believe, because people aren't willing to do the work.
Right.
You know, any relationship of any kind, any relationship, and I also mean my relationship with God, for example, that takes and has taken a long time to establish and grow because of the work that I put into it. And it was the same thing for us. It was very uncomfortable in the beginning and very painful. And he had a lot of anger, and I was very confused. And we really did this thing, alcoholism, just wants to get into a family and wring it dry and then break it apart and cause you great misery before it destroys you, and more often than not kills the alcoholic. The statistics are very grim. It's something like 10 to 13% of people get and stay sober. So that is something I would say, that it took us a long, long time to get to this place where we both have spiritual paths that work for us. They're very, very different. But at the end of the day in my life, I'm realizing that that was the thing I was missing all along. And it doesn't have to be some religious God, but it's some kind of spiritual connection where I feel that I have a purpose and that I'm of service. And that was something that I could never see before. It was probably there all along. In fact,
Right.
I'm sure it was.
Well,
But that is where we're at. Yeah.
and and the reality of it is we all have a purpose, but sometimes we're afraid to figure out what that purpose is. Because again, as I've read your memoirs, I think I could feel that there was a purpose behind what you wanted to do, but you had the anguish of this disease going on. And in your latest book, Are You There, Judy Blume? Nobody really explained your kidney disease to you.
No.
So here you are as a young person going and having blood work on a regular basis.
Yes.
You're told you have this condition, but you don't hurt. You're not sick.
Yeah.
And who do who do you even share it with? Because would your classmates really believe it? Because you look just like them. And I had to go do some research in the middle of reading the book. It's like, what do you mean she didn't have any symptoms? What do you mean she wasn't sick? Of course she
Yeah.
would be. And then I realized, no, and so
That's-
how could you take care of yourself? And the reality of it is, I think you mentioned this, there was really nothing you could have done. It was going to progress on its own, no matter what you did.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think the only thing um, that you can do is find some kind of community or support system when you're chronically ill. Not the only thing. And I most certainly had no God at that time, no spiritual life, as it were. If anything, most likely Seth in the book and my mom were like my higher powers.
Right.
They were my anchors. They were the people that I really relied on. And, we are, despite everything that we hear about social media today and how, it can be very negative and a hostile place, et cetera, et cetera. It has been my saving grace in this day and age because I write about this in the book, but I have I have access to an entire community online, the Renal Support Network. I have a young woman who's had 2 kidney transplants by 30. She's spent several years on dialysis. I've only spent a handful of weeks. And we text every day a little gratitude list with each other. And I now spend a lot of my time, everybody in my world knows that I've had 2 kidney transplants. And in fact, a couple days ago, I spent 90 minutes talking with a woman who just had a transplant in Asheville, and it's not doing very well. She's on an incredible amount of immunosuppression. So her hands are tremoring. She can't work because she's an acupuncturist. Her quality of life, she's not on dialysis, but it's changed in a way that a normal person wouldn't understand because they look at her and they see, oh, but you look so good now. And
Yeah.
she's like tremoring inside with migraines and back pain from the medication. Her identity's been taken away because she can no longer work. And only somebody that's gone through that can truly understand that. And that was completely missing from my experience when I was a teen. In addition to which, they also used to over immunosuppress because it was such a new science, transplantation in the 80s. So I had such a round moon face, which sounds like vanity, and to a degree it was, but I was so physically altered that I didn't even recognize myself. I didn't recognize the way the drugs made me feel, very hyper emotional, very aggressive, hard to sleep. And you're absolutely right. No one at that time, probably because it was so new for them, but really understood how it impacted us when physiologically we were so changed. And I couldn't just go on WebMD
Yeah.
and look
It wasn't.
what was happening to me. I went down to the reference library,
Yeah.
but they only had so little on transplantation. So those were some of my toughest years, even though I was quote unquote my healthiest physically. They were really some of the toughest times I walked through.
In your book, when you talked about prednisone, I had just been put on it for an immune disorder I have. Now, nobody
Okay.
told me I was going to get that moon face. Nobody told me that I was going to gain weight.
Yeah.
And I was exercising and I was watching what I was eating, and my face could get rounder and rounder. And I put on 30 pounds.
Yeah.
And I called the doctor and I said, "What is wrong?" And he goes, "Oh, don't worry. You need the prednisone. That's what it does." And I'm reading your book and I'm reading your symptoms and I'm going, I wish somebody had told me.
Yeah.
Not that I would have done it any differently, but I would have been more aware. But I too could not look in the mirror. And
Yeah.
I was podcasting, and every time I was seeing my face on screen like now, I wanted to cry because that wasn't me. Um, but I
Yes.
finally had to accept the fact that it is me for now. Now that was different, you know, because anybody out there listening, please understand the best you can. What you're experiencing now is something you have to experience to move forward.
Hmm.
And I was lucky enough a little over a year ago that my doctor realized that the medication he had me on was doing nothing for me. In fact, it was making me worse. Um, he finally, weaned me off.
Yeah.
And do I still have, immune problems? Yes, I do. But I'm learning how to control them. And some of them are through, you know, doing yoga, having a cleaner thought process, eating cleaner. And for me, that works.
Yeah.
Okay. Do I still hurt? Absolutely. But I don't live for the hurt.
That's right.
So
That's right.
tell me about Are You There, Judy Blume? It's me, Henrietta, because I loved all those questions you kept asking. What made you
Mm.
go in that direction?
Oh gosh. It is. I wrote it very quickly, and the first draft was done in like 3 months, which, some people can do. It took me a lot longer with the other two books. And I realized when my editor finished editing it, he said, "This is not, now I understand why you wrote it so quickly." And he said, "It's not something that you had to remember." He said, "This thing has been living inside of you since it happened. And it's almost like how did he explain it? It's like you put a piece of tracing paper over, like a gravestone or something, and you just brush the pencil across it and it just emerges." And he said, "That's what happened here. This just kind of emerged from your heart." And like I said earlier, there's no question this was a love that informed so much of who I was at that time. And even though for a lot of it we weren't actually together, it gave being in love with someone who was also in love with me gave me the feeling of a lightness and the possibility of love and passion and all of that that I didn't realize was still possible for me. This was right on the heels of losing my father in a very dark, depressing way to alcoholism. I mean, my father's teeth fell out at the table. He was shriveled up at 38 and died of alcoholism. It was a horrible, dark death. And there was just this shadow over everything when I started high school. And so to be attracted to someone that in a lot of ways, yes, reminded me of my dad. Is very, very smart. We just always had great conversations, and it was just a deep, deep love that informed and gave me hope that even though we didn't end up together, that this was something that was still possible for me despite such a dark childhood. And then the other piece of it is most certainly that I think the main theme in all of my books is how do you live through chronic illness? How do you survive chronic illness and pain? And of course, with Pillness, that is obviously the wrong direction, but the way I dealt with it primarily was with pain management, was with through my drug addiction. With the second book, it was such a horrendous period of time in my life when I had chronic pain that it was my quest for some kind of spiritual solution and the surrender to that, that medical science wasn't going to be able to help me with this one. It was going to have to be a spiritual solution. And, with this book, it was most certainly being introduced to the idea of love, which couldn't be sustained through our relationship, but it introduced me to the idea that I could be okay through self-love, and that was also a way that I was able to get through that period of time, was being in love with someone and being loved in return. And so that's really the theme of all of my books, is that it is such chronic is chronic. Chronic means ongoing, chronic means forever, essentially. And so how do you manage? And so that's the theme that I really want. And then of course Judy Blume, that's like a third piece of that book. Judy Blume was such and still is truly a radical. She was a radical voice in that period of time in the mid late 70s when I started reading her books. Nobody just told it like pragmatically, straight on, she was candid, she was truthful about, like a penis and coming and masturbation and menstruation, because these are a part of life. This
Right.
is all natural. This is all a part of life. And you just felt she wasn't talking down to you. You felt that. She respected you as a young reader, and you felt that. And in doing my research for this book, most of the books that came before her, pretty much all of the teen books that came before her, there was always some consequence to two teens having sex. They either got pregnant, or, someone ended up in a home, or, it was not acceptable to do that. And this was just a beautifully natural book, not gratuitous, as the band people would like to tell you. Just a beautifully open, natural experience of what sexuality is between two teenagers, with no other consequence but other than that they loved each other. And so I really wanted to honor that. I really wanted to honor that because she was such a guide for me. She was so in my head through that whole romance. She's incredible. And that's why she's still relevant today.
And you also had two other people who have been very supportive. Your mother is one. Um, Number one, she gave you a kidney. I think
Yes.
most mothers would like to be able to save their child in some way. Um, and then you have your sister-in-law, who just has been
Oh
another
yeah.
guiding light. Um, and not everybody has that.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you're going through what you've gone through, uh, people pull away. They don't understand you, or they
Yeah.
don't want to understand you. I understand why your mother remains supportive. She's mom. But
Sure.
your sister-in-law, what was in it for her? Because she's a sister-in-law.
I mean, gosh, Karen, like that's a question for her in a way, but I've known Kim now I met Kevin in 1991. So I met her in 92. she's just, a rare breed. She's just like there is, like I wrote in the acknowledgments in the back, there is no mold before her or after her. She's just, for her line of work currently, she helps men transition out of prison into and helps them find resources for living on the outside, essentially, is what she does. She has support groups that she hosts. She helps them find places to live. She really just she embodies unconditional love for people, compassion. And she just, I think it was the same thing as Kevin. They knew I was sick, so they had a lot of compassion for that. I think they knew somewhere deep down I wanted to get well. She's been my beta reader on all of these books. And if you can imagine reading Pillness, she didn't know the extent of the stories and how I treated her brother. And she said she would open the email and she would take a deep breath before she read the next chapter. But she never, ever judged me. And that is it. I mean, really, I call her my
Anyway,
sister-in-law, not my sister-in-law,
yeah,
because we are
I,
sisters in love. Yeah,
I
she's
love
truly
that.
remarkable.
So you've been in some Hallmark movies most recently. Do we have anything coming up for the holidays?
Well, nothing for the holidays, but I did just get cast in a series here that's going to be shot in Winnipeg called Mad Men, a John Hamm series. That's why I said Mad Men, called what's it called? Shortwave. It used to be called American Hostage. So it's in pre-production now. I'm not really sure how much I can talk about it, but it is about a hostage taking in the 70s in Indianapolis, and it takes place at a radio station, and John Hamm is going to play the main DJ who interviews the person that took the bank employee hostage. And it's an 8 episode limited series, and I have a small recurring part as the head of sales at the radio station. So yeah, I'm super excited
That's
about that.
exciting. And
Very excited.
any other books on the horizon?
Yeah, I just started working on, I've had the format, the structure of it plotted out, but the next book is going to be called Dog Shaped Hole. So it's going to be delving into it's going to span most of my life, but delving into the lives of my 5 dogs prior to Jack and how they essentially represented the closest thing I had to spirituality before I had any kind of connection with a God myself. How dogs are just present for you all the time. They embody unconditional love. And particularly the stories I'm selecting are those when I was really sick, struggling, and how the dogs were there for me during that period of time, and how they gave me a sense of purpose because I didn't often, I was on dialysis or wasn't able to work or wasn't able to, audition or whatever it was. But even just the simple act of taking care of my pet, feeding them, loving them. So I'm exploring that, and I read some rough pages to my mother last night, and she was hysterically laughing because it was about our very first dog that we adopted together.
Well, I was hoping that we'd hear more about Jack too, because he is gorgeous. And my husband is highly allergic to dogs and cats. And I
Oh,
keep saying, the day you're gone, I'm getting a dog. And he looks at me and goes, no, you're not. But you never know.
you
Um,
never know.
Thank you so much for joining me. And for all of you out there, in the show notes, there will be a link how you can get to Henrietta's books. I want to encourage you to read them, not just because I'm interviewing Henrietta today, but I think it's important that we understand that there is addiction all around us. And unless we can understand what people are going through, um, we're not going to be able to help each other. And it's not about judging each other. And I will tell you that my son was on a lot of medication in his earlier life because he was diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And people judged him for the medication he took. Why are
Yeah.
you doing that? And he kept saying, because my medical team tells me I have to. And he did learn more about his body as he grew up, and he went back to his doctors, and he did get off almost every medication he had been on, but he was judged. And that is sad because it
Yeah.
did help him in his early years. So let's
Yeah.
stop judging. Let's start to understand. read Henriette's books, and I will tell you, um, you will crawl on the floor with her and you will rejoice with her as well. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for being such an incredible force in this world. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. Love to Kevin.
You bet. You bet.
Bye.